Hi, it's my really great pleasure to introduce Jonathan Meyers from Keolis Downer here with us today to give you some overview of the issues and some inspiration, I hope, for the kinds of problems that you will be addressing in your collaborative learning network problem for this subject, design thinking for business. Jonathan's a great guy. I met him when we were doing our own MBAs together, which is one of the reasons why it's particularly special for me to bring him and introduce him to you at the beginning of your MBA journeys. Jonathan has had a long history in the transport industries, initially as a consultant and now working with Keolis Downer in a strategy role. He's also a very logical, calm, even-mannered gentleman, and in fact he was awarded the Leadership Award for the whole of our MBA program, and I think you'll see some of his calm leadership qualities when we speak in just a minute. So without any more further ado, I'm going to introduce him and ask him to tell you a little bit about himself and his role before going into the body of the report.
Okay, I'm Jonathan Meyers. I'm Head of Growth, Innovation and Partnerships for Keolis Downer. I'll tell you a bit about Keolis Downer in a minute. But broadly speaking, it's a transport company. We do mostly mass transit type public transport, so light rail, buses, and we're also increasingly looking at what we call the final mile solution, so transport on demand, mobility as a service, and part of that is also including looking at autonomous vehicles and how those might be part of the overall transport solution. So Kath's asked me to talk a bit about what I've been up to, particularly in the autonomous vehicle space, and how that might present some potential issues for you guys to explore in considering innovation.
Great.
All right.
So, and you have an MBA, by the way, don't you?
I do. How did
I know that? How did I know that? So most of the students that you're talking to are in the very first subjects of their MBAs. Some of them are in the certificate course and might move into an MBA at some point. So yeah, very early on days for them. So
excellent. Well, it's a great thing to be doing. I found mine very useful, as well as the actual process itself being highly entertaining.
Yeah, highly entertaining is a good word for it.
All right, shall we kick off?
Yeah, when you're ready.
All right, hopefully I'll make the technology work. So just a bit about Keolis Downer. We're 51% owned by Keolis, which is a French company, international, one of the largest international transport companies in public transport. And Downer is a big Australian or Australian-New Zealand engineering firm who are into mining, utilities, and also quite a lot of innovation and technical engineering. They've also just bought Spotless, who are a big facilities management company. So going from a heavy sort of focus on big one-off construction contracts to much longer-term service contracts, like, for example, public transport contracts. And they've also had a history in rolling stock supply, so they're building the high-speed, high-capacity trains in Victoria, for example. We're in Adelaide, Brisbane, Perth, Melbourne, and Newcastle, and our head office is actually in Sydney. But we've only got a teeny tiny little operation there at the moment, but we've got about 250 million passengers a year. About 500 light rail vehicles and over 1,100 buses. So we're reasonable size. So what am I doing here today? I'm going to try and do, and Kath, I'm assuming you're going to jump in and ask questions and clarify if I'm wishing on, but you can also edit this, so
I have the power. Yes, exactly.
So what I wanted to do is provide a sort of real use case of, what happens with innovation or around innovation in the real world. It's not just theory. Give you some idea of some of the sort of micro issues and macro that are relevant to the problems the issues we're looking at, and highlight some of the challenges and opportunities and issues that we're trying to address at the moment. And from that, I'm hoping we'll provide you with all sorts of exciting opportunities to take things off your own ideas and run with those for your project.
Yeah. And as you're thinking about what Jonathan has to say from his perspective, you're really at this stage thinking about, is there a problem here we could fall in love with as a group? My language, not academic language, clearly. Is there a problem that we could really get our teeth into so that we can start then using that as the basis for ideating? So often we're looking in the gaps between where traditional problems sit. And as we talk, maybe some of the things you can point out as well where you're thinking about those gaps. So that final mile solution language that's clearly you're familiar with is, and I'm guessing a little bit here, connected to that part of the problem is that people don't want to get the bus from stop A to stop B. They want to go from home to a place and return
Absolutely.
again.
Yeah, so it's and that's the real inhibitor to getting people out of their cars. It's so much easier to get in the car and go all the way to where they're going than necessarily
that's me.
walk a little, from home and then connect with transport. So if we can pick them up from home or very close to home, and then feed them into the system, maybe that will change a lot of the behaviours. Anyway, so first of all, I'm not sure how many of you are autonomous vehicle skeptics, think it's way in the future, it's not real, or are all over it. But anyway, so apologies to those who are highly familiar and confident in the realities. Just thought I'd try and show a little video about what Keolis has been doing more globally, and give you the sense that this is really happening and it's now, it's not just way out in the future. Having had a look at that, hopefully you're excited and now true believers in the autonomous vehicle or the possibilities of it as an adjunct to existing transport opportunities. And as you'll see, yes, there are lots of things that still need solving, and those are really the sort of issues we're dealing with, and I'll come on to those. So what we've got in terms of the transport market, though, is the sort of confluence of emerging demand for some alternative to the car, both individual desires and preferences, as well as very real congestion issues facing most major cities around the world, or most cities, and a need to do something, have a different approach. We've got huge strides forward in relevant technology for connectivity, electric vehicles, and safety, and I'll talk a bit about the tech side, that I have to say isn't my area of expertise, but anyway. Also importantly is this concept of the shared economy, and I expect you all much younger than certainly I am. Obviously Kat is a good deal younger than me. But
I wish that were true.
The shared economy is now much more established. Everything from Airbnb to Uber and everything else. So people being prepared to get into vehicles with others is a big step forward, which may sound a bit odd in the sense of well, public transport, everyone gets on and squishes in together. But I think it is a different mindset of a different context for being prepared to get into a stranger's car, and because it's a bit more intimate, but however, people have clearly crossed that Rubicon and aren't prepared to do it for the right price point and service package. And I've talked about congestion and densification, not only what's faced now, but certainly in Melbourne, Sydney, and other cities around the world. We're looking at huge growth in the next 10 to 15 years, where we've already got major traffic jams and time wasted. So we need to be doing something now for the problem that's going to get only even worse as time goes on. So all of those things have led to the emergence of on-demand transport and mobility as a service, in the sense that your smartphone enables you to summon a vehicle, an Uber or a taxi, whatever you want to call it, or different options. And the mobility as a service is taking that notion a bit further forward, and some of you may be familiar with it, where you can, all on one smartphone, both plan your journey, have yourself picked up and transferred between modes, and payment all organised, all off one platform, sort of seamlessly. So that's the sort of area that we're looking at as being a convenient, efficient, cost-effective way of adding to the transport solutions on offer. So a bit of data there, and I'll let you read that rather than try and talk to it, but it's just, I guess, providing a bit of evidence to some of my bigger picture assertions about where we are now and why the status quo is not going to be sustainable in terms of population growth, urbanisation, and congestion, and also the numbers of private cars rapidly escalating. The other interesting sort of area is the cost sort of curve and this is taken off some work done by LEK, who are some excellent consultants, vastly expensive, I hasten to add. So,
at least half, if not more, of the people you're speaking to are planning to be excellent and expensive.
Okay, well,
if not now, very
gig,
soon.
If you can get a gig with LEK, you won't have much for life, but you'll make a lot of money. So anyway, LEK have done this work. It's a couple of years old now, but what it's demonstrating is the price point for public transport is now beginning to be encroached upon by the on-demand market. So the first slide I'm looking at is the one that just shows the price per journey in London for one of those classic London taxis, a black cab, which is about £10, and then £8 for a minicab, and then there's a big drop down to about £2.40 for the London Underground, the tube, and £1.50 for the bus. So that was the sort of original price point. We've now seen, or even back then, things like Zipcar coming in to compete with the minicabs at a similar sort of price point. But then Uber emerged and is suddenly, becoming halfway down, maybe towards the area of, it's about maybe £4. So it's much closer to the value of the tube. And then once you get into Uber Hop or Uber Pool, where you're sharing the cost of the service with others, you're really getting right down to be price point comparative or competitive anyway, comparative with other forms of public transport. So it's making the whole market much more accessible and usable for a whole range of transport solutions. So that's just, again, trying to provide you that I haven't just made up this, shown you a nice glossy video done in a studio that AVs do drive around, but this concept of on-demand transport really is here, it's with us, won't go away, it's not a flash in the pan, it's sustainable. It's a question of how we develop that, and we can, if you like, use the autonomous vehicles to make it even more cost effective, take the driving cost out of the equation, and therefore how can we use this low cost transport option to be effective without just duplicating the high carbon emissions vehicles, so we can move into an electric autonomous vehicle driverless situation. So what are we, in terms of where we are then with autonomous vehicles, we've got urban design and urban planning issues. So how does that need to change to make the use of autonomous vehicles easier, better, possible? And one of the basic things is at the moment, and that there is infrastructure for buses, the little carve outs of the pavement where the buses pull in and don't block the traffic. At the moment, to a certain extent taxis, but any other vehicles that have to stop, there's no provision for them to pick people up safely. They're just stop in the middle of the road. Clearly, that's not good. So, but also things like parking. If we're trying to get rid of cars or reduce the reliance on individual transport modes, we need to have a think about the provision of public parking, maybe dedicated lanes for certain types of vehicles. We have bus lanes. So those sorts of things in the urban design space. Regulation, clearly lots of safety technical issues, and we'll talk a bit about those to protect people. It's one thing to have a driver that can be regulated and trained and accredited, but if you've got no one in the vehicle, who's taking responsibility for safety? How do we maintain the vehicles? All those sorts of things.
And I'm guessing too that there's a transition issue as well, isn't there? That you're not going to go from where we are now to the perfect vision of the future, and so part of the vision for the future needs to map out how you're going to solve getting there and that transition space, which adds complexity before it goes away. Yeah,
absolutely. And one of the big issues we're facing at the moment is some of us can see a future. There are others who see a different future and don't want the future we're envisioning to happen. And then there's government thinking, well, we need to allow this technology. It looks exciting, new possibilities, but we don't want to inhibit it. So maybe we should sit on the fence and do nothing. Now, question is that the right thing? So how do we persuade government to support the development of things in the right way? So these are just some of the issues. Sorry, I'll move on. So we've then got the technology, electrification. So stored batteries. That technology is improving. The actual connected vehicles, connectivity between smartphones. We've talked about vehicle to vehicle to infrastructure. How do you can book online? You can track the vehicle. All those sorts of things. And then there's the actual smarts within the vehicle, the mapping and following the direction, where to stop, how fast to stop, and dealing with the sort of practical delivery of the service. And then, of course, there's the customer. Does anybody actually want to use it? Why do they use it? When would they use it? When's the best type of, what's the most suitable type of service? So all these issues are providing the sort of four main areas as we see them, which will contribute to the extent of delay or the speed with which things are taken up. And there are lots of issues within each of those areas to be resolved. But again, just a few data points in terms of the technology developing, the cost of lithium-ion batteries and demand is cost going down, demand going up rapidly, increasing sophistication of the technology in terms of vehicle to vehicle, smartphones, and then the actual capabilities of the vehicle itself in terms of the weight of the vehicle and strength and speed and all that sort of stuff. So all that rapidly can accelerating, and combined, as I mentioned earlier, with the comfort levels with shared anything, including shared mobility. And there's some stats based on lots of different countries, and clearly the pre-boomers. Are we pre-boomers? Not quite, maybe. We are old, but maybe not that old.
No, I may be older than you. I think I'm born in the last year of being a boomer.
Okay, I don't know.
65 was the last year.
We're twinnies.
Oh, we're twins? So. Yeah, well, I like to think of us as the first of whatever came next.
Anyway, so you can see, the chart vividly shows you that Gen Y, Gen Z are much more accepting, but even us oldies are not too bad in terms of the shared economy. Again, technology varies as it happens. Now, one of Keolis Downer's partners, we're working with them on on-demand services in Sydney and Newcastle. They're developed in the US. It's actually Israeli company. I think it was Israeli Tech originally, but hugely successful. And in terms of the impact on the system, they're doing 1.5 million rides a month or something.
Wow.
In New York and Chicago and DC and all around the place. And most importantly, they are at 1.8 passengers per trip. So they are aggregating demand. They're not just about individual, different types of car on the road. It's actually, with individual drivers, it's 1.8 per trip or passenger mile. Whereas taxis down at 0.5 and Ubers at 0.6. So there you go.
Interesting.
So what, in bigger picture terms, just to try and again give you a few ideas to sort of think about, in public transport or in transport, we've got a wide array of sort of options. You've got public transport, you've got driver as a service, and car as a service. I suppose we've sort of categorised them and different players. So Keolis Downer, and then in Australia we've also got Transdev, another French international player, and Transit Systems, who are originally Australian but are now in Singapore and London, amongst others. In the driver as a service, you've got Uber, Lyft, BlaBlaCar, Lyft Tango, Chariot. So hopefully you'll be familiar, or some of you will be familiar with some of those names, and some of them are Australian, some of them are international. So I'm not sure. I think your student base is global, so...
predominantly Australian. I haven't actually seen the list for this group yet, but
anyway,
on average I've got about 5%
local.
in other places, but they're often Australian-based, or originated, not always so.
But hopefully some of those names, it's not purely Oz-centric, I suppose.
They're an incredibly well-travelled and interesting bunch on the whole. Otherwise I get rid of them, so yeah, they will know these brands, I'm sure.
Okay, and then you've got what I call the enablers, so toll roads, parking facilitators, and for electric vehicles, charge points. So obviously the sort of infrastructure providers or service providers around the transport space. So all these people, and then on the top of that, you've got the service provider, or journey companions we call them. So that could be a ticketing provider, a journey planner, a software platform to tell you where to park or where you can park, and then other sort of broader service providers in the transport space like NRMA or RACV or AAA. So the point I'm making is there are a wide range of players who currently do different things, but increasingly with autonomous vehicles, the opportunity to move from your own, or these people to move from their current space of operation or influence in the market to do different things is opening up. So it's a highly competitive market, I suppose, is the main point there. So the question then in this... So
can I just stop you for a second? So I find that interesting, this idea it's a competitive market, but it's still really only roughly defined what we're competing for, other than passenger bums on a seat over time, right? That's the key metric. But what that competition looks like and what different aspects of the market are going to be is still relatively nebulous. Is it?
So, or
am I being...
No, but I think the opportunity it is a bit unknown, but clearly, or the volume of trips from, if you like, home to
anywhere
is known. The volume of trips on public transport is known. Or the split between personalised trip or individual car trips and walking, those are generally known. So you can work out the sort of size of the on-demand market, and then you work out which bits you're going to target. But I suppose if you take a step back and think about what the future of transport or mobility could look like, if we go down the path of shared transport, people will move away from having their own vehicle, and because it'll be cheap enough and convenient enough and reliable enough, you just summon a vehicle, and that at the moment you can assume it doesn't have. It could be with the driver or without, but the vehicle comes to you, takes you where you want to go, whether it's a long trip or a short one, or feeds you into a high-speed train that zooms you across the country or to the airport or whatever. but you don't own a vehicle. So, well, what does that mean for car manufacturers? Is that suddenly going to cut the volume of individual cars? What does that mean if we're moving to electric vehicles suddenly? You know, the whole structure of the road charging system and fuel excise. Who's paying for the roads?
Yeah.
There are a lot less vehicles on them, and they're all using electricity, they're not using carbon fuel. So that whole economic structure changes. How, we're not sure, but you know, so car manufacturers thinking, oh crap.
Yeah.
You know, so if we can make a few, we need to do something else as well to maintain scale. So do we get into the software that's actually running the wheels and aluminium, the boxes that are running around? Do we get into communications infrastructure? Do we get it? You know, actually, is it the volume of data that's winging about between the vehicles, the infrastructure? Do we need to own that? Do we need to, you know, clip the ticket on the way through? Is it cybersecurity that's really the main game now? But there are lots of players who have a part of this emerging business, but on its own, it's probably not enough. So lots of people have the ability to jump in because it's new. So the transport operators, we're in there, but at the moment, do we have to buy the vehicles? Do we have to control the back end?
So if we think about strategy as winning, then thinking about any enterprise's long term really requires thinking about the problem in a holistic way, and then thinking what the opportunities are, including outside of an organisation's current core capability. It's also about capability building and either picking a path or many paths, Yeah,
that's right.
Lots of things for you guys to think about.
And one of the first, I suppose, strategic decision is, do you wait and see, or do you move? You know, first mover versus second winner.
Yeah.
Sort of classic dilemma. Do we wait and see? And again, just to give you a sense, for apologies if everyone's familiar, but the slide I'm putting up now is showing the different levels of automation, from the sort of 100% human-driven to the 100% automated, and there are officially 5 levels, although there is a level 0, so that's 6, but everyone talks about 5 levels. So there's different stages, and right now we're kind of we're about at level 3. I think the Audi 8 is the first, which is now in the market. I did check the websites yesterday. It was talking about mid 2018 for launch in Australia. It is actually, or you can book one or test drive one, even if you can't physically take delivery of one. But they're here. They are the world's first, I'm told, fully level 3 capable vehicle, and there are others around which are not in commercial production that are at level 4 or level 5. So timeline for all this happening, again, based on probably a slightly old, but anyway, it'll no doubt change as we go on, but this is the charts, which OEM, original equipment manufacturer or automobile manufacturer, has said they will have what level of automation in the market available by when. So Waymo are talking about 2018, Tesla as well. For level 5 automation, I think the earliest is around 2025. Daimler Bosch, and Bosch have had a test vehicle running around on the Eastern Freeway for the last 12 months on and off. So anyway, different car companies make different claims, and you can either believe them or not. But it's broadly speaking, the next 10 years is what they're saying. Obviously, take your own view. Again, a bit more data on this. I'm not going to dwell on it, but you can have a look in the slide pack. And again, just think of the timing in terms of the different things I mentioned at the beginning: the technology, the consumer preference, the urban planning and the regulation of the things that need to be in place for stuff to happen. And really what I'm saying in Australia is, okay, well, even if technically all those things come together in a jurisdiction, I think it's unlikely to be Australia by 2025, but if you think about the scale of the businesses we're talking about, worldwide manufacture of automobiles, worldwide supply of carbon fuels, worldwide supply and manufacture of electric batteries. These are big industries. So 10 years is not a great deal of time for a market.
No,
to move
when we
in
look
and
at
change and be.
the transitional work that's been done in the automotive, or the removal of manufacturing across automotive in Australia over the last, well, it's been 10, 15 years coming, and the policy work and the tax concessions, a whole range of different factors have gone into that thinking, and it seems to me that this kind of change is only going to happen quicker.
I think that's right.
I mean, the one thing we see about transformational change is it happens quicker now than it did before.
And interesting, I mean, the advent of Uber in Australia and other parts of the world, they took the view that they were going to kind of storm the market even if they weren't allowed to be there, and people just used them. And in some cases, it's caught up with them and they've been kicked out. But I mean, that's taken 2 or 3 years, and in the meantime, everyone's saying, well, no, we need a better alternative to the crappy taxis.
Yeah, well, they won the hearts and minds before they dealt with the regulatory issues, but I'm not so sure that I would want a fully autonomous vehicle driving my kids around before they'd fully tested what the safety features of that were. Yeah,
absolutely. But that testing is starting now in all sorts of different forms. So some other slides, and again, I'll let you read them, but it's really just trying to give you a sense of how this process of change is already starting around the world, and the sort of areas where it is happening. And I think for me, the area that will be hardest for governments to resist, that there are obviously big lobbies working on the interests of the carbon fuel providers and the car manufacturers on governments, and they are influential and effective. Safety, if the safety case, for road deaths and injuries and accidents, if that can be proven in terms of the efficacy of automation and infrastructure to vehicle connectivity, that will instantly win the argument and save a lot of money, as well as all the angst and terrible human waste, and governments won't be able to resist that. So for me, that I think will be the driver of change, but it will take the evidence needs to be collected and proven and so on.
Well, and there's a whole swag of ethical issues in there as well. Even if you think about the classic trolley model, the man on the with the oncoming trolley. Don't know why he's always a fat man on the bridge, but the question, do you
stop the vehicle?
I guess so. I feel like it's some sort of diversion, some sort of discrimination. But anyway, the question, do we throw the fat man off the bridge? Can we pull the lever? What are these issues? But when we're talking about autonomous vehicles, and the question is, we save 5 people in one direction or 1 child in another direction, an elderly person. These things are decisions that are hard decisions for humans to make, but ultimately machines can only make them the way that they're programmed to make.
Right.
And, it will become the ultimate Ford Pinto, won't it? A question of whether or not you're throwing enough money to the problems. I will provide you with resources, so you know what I'm talking about. If you're listening to me carry on there.
So back to what we're doing. We're in 3 autonomous vehicle trials. We've just finished one at La Trobe University. We're just starting one this week, actually, at Adelaide in the Tonsley campus, Flinders University. And we are working on the details of starting one in Newcastle. Around the world, we're running vehicles in La Défense in Paris, in the financial district. We've been running since September 2016 in Lyon, a little shuttle. I think that's really what the video was largely of, in the Lyon shuttles around the Docklands area in Lyon. And lots of demos around the world and other operations in LA and Montreal and around all over the world. And that's just the stuff we've directly been involved in. Clearly there's AVs being piloted and launched all over the place now by lots of different people. So back to the problems and issues. challenge, I think, particularly regulatory frameworks. We need to allow for this to happen, but not stifle it. Clearly, the safety issues you mentioned. The latest, this I gave a similar talk to you, class 12 months ago or so. And the bit I've added since then is policy vacuum. I think one of our real challenges is this fact that government is essentially sitting on its hands, saying, "Oh, we don't want to interfere." But what we really need is a visionary approach and some leadership from government that says, you know what, we can see congestion now. If we don't do anything else, there'll be even worse congestion. So we don't want that. It's no good for anybody. Better for the environment, better for the economy of the city, better for health. Let's take a stand on private car. And some cities have done that. Singapore, Stockholm, London, and I think they're reaping the rewards.
Yeah, and they've used financial levers.
That's right. So you can, we're not saying you can't have a private car, but if you choose to use it, because you're choosing to take up road space or parking space or pollute, there's a cost that goes with that. And in the meantime, we'll provide you with a much better, flexible, real alternative, affordable alternative in terms of public transport. So that's what we're missing, I think, in Australia at the moment, and for me, that's a big one. What are the opportunities? New services and better customer experience, better urban planning outcomes and design. I think we've all seen in lots of different cities around the world some of what can be achieved in new urban development without, with good feeder transport services, open walking space, attractive buildings, light and air, but the ability to choose between different modes. I mean, I went to Bordeaux 12. Sorry.
I love sentences that begin with "I went to Bordeaux."
Sorry. About 2 years ago, it's one of the places that we operate, and one of the fantastic things about they've done a complete clean. They've got a sort of superhuman mayor, and it does seem to be mayors. It's local pollies who.
Well, and this is actually a question I was going to ask you is, the first thing that you think about where decisions about transport can go terribly wrong is Australia's multiple rail gauge issue.
Yeah. And
that's because different states solve the same problem in different ways. And so I guess one of the questions you need to ask here is, if we're thinking about Australia or thinking about the world globally, what things do we need the same solution for, and where is there room for unique, bespoke, local solutions? And I mean, that might be something that these students can really focus on and think about. Because if you think how annoying it is not having the right charger for your phone, a whole different transport mode.
Well, one of the things we did a presentation is the connectivity of charging. And the states were about to agree 2 different standards for charging, so that you drive from Queensland into New South Wales and you find you can't plug in yet.
You need a different adapter.
So anyway, I think they have managed to correct that now. But
there's a Black Mirror episode. I think the first one ever has that particular futuristic issue of an old charger for your car. If you get the wrong rental, you're in all sorts of trouble.
That's right. So I think I've probably left you already in no doubt that I think the future is shared mobility, not private cars competing with a sort of public transport choice. But clearly there are some major issues of independence and personal choice about how we get there, and that I can see is politically unattractive to deal with, but nevertheless I think it does need to be addressed. So timing wise, I think the regulation and legislation will follow the technology and consumer preference. I think we need to continue, the industry and academia need to facilitate experiments to help the decision making and developing the regulations, and also working out what works and what doesn't. We need to collaborate nationally and internationally for consistent standards. We need investment, and that one always makes me laugh, but it's I guess, a constant source of both irritation and some amusement, in that as a big international provider, private company, who is involved in transport, we continually approached to ask if we'd like to provide basically free services to demonstrate up this technology, and the short answer is no. We're in the business of making money, but yes, the reality is we do need to make some investment in demonstrating this technology to help people understand it, help people to come to terms with it. But government, I think it is the role of government to invest in this new world and work with industry and academia to find the right solutions of both what the service is, how it operates, how it should be regulated.
What it means for jobs, what it means for industry, what it means for the way that people think about not just their mobility, but their lives as a whole. What they need to learn at school, how they entertain themselves.
All these things. So a few more bullets on there just for things to think about. Again, some or none may be of interest to you, but just the things that are on our radar. So road safety we've mentioned. So do we manage that purely through technology and just try and improve the LiDAR and the radar and the other tech to stop accidents, or do we just rethink the way roads work? Do we just have segregated lanes, make them more like railways where everyone's going in platoons in one direction? You limit the flexibility. Anyway, incentivize desired behaviours. So I think we can do a lot. This is another area I think government should be working on, is putting in those behaviours that drive towards better outcomes in terms of, but subsidising more sustainable shared mobility versus individual choice, individual mobility options.
Maybe not even just government. I completely agree with you that there's a huge policy role there, but so as a lawyer, I just know how hard it is to get a law up and running. I mean, just think about the current state of the most recent budget, but also there are other big players who can direct behaviours, like insurance companies, for example. Could you change the model of insurance so that insurance is for the driver without any, or the user of vehicles, as opposed to attaching it to the car or the vehicle itself? Can you take into account with health insurance even the extent to which people are using transport models that decrease overall levels of pollution or increase their cardiovascular exercise? I'm really thinking out loud, but I think that we do tend to just use the traditional people responsible for solving the problem, the people who sell stuff, the governments who collect taxes. They're easy targets, but I think this group can think more broadly about other people who come in from other sides and the extent to which that can be an incentive.
Just on that, we've been looking at a joint funding proposal with another institution and another tech player, and the notion is that in the context of Yarra Trams, one of our subsidiaries here, we're looking at a bit of research that would use a smartphone app that basically gives you journey planning advice, but also takes into account your individual age, health status, where you travel, how you travel, and it gives you travel options. One of the benefit or intentions being to, from our point of view, particularly in the city, we've got very full free trams. A lot of people are just travelling 200, 300 metres. It'd be much better for them if they walked. It'd be much better for the people on the longer journeys who are going through the city if those other short journeys were walked. And you can envisage a sort of gamified situation where people are, with their insurance company sponsorship, get more points for accumulating, more walking trips rather than driven or public transport. So there are some very interesting ideas, and I think in the UK actually, someone was telling me, I think it's in Manchester, register, or the health agency and the PT agency have come together and are providing subsidised basically transport. So if you walk rather than take any other trip, you get a deduction to your next public transport fare, but it's based on, and then it's also feeding into your health profile and insurance for medical.
Well, yeah, and at the end of the day, people are just trying to get from place A to place B, but do it in the larger context.
This app is it's often showing you it's quicker to walk, and not take the means that you thought was in the car, but either you take PT or walk, and it actually works out quicker for you. So you're being more efficient, and you're getting healthier, and it's giving you some other benefit as well. So amazing what you can do these days. So I guess it comes back to my current beef, which is how do we expect to get where we need to be if we don't have a picture of what it is, or a plan of how to get there. And this is back to what we need is some visionary political leadership to say, okay, this is where we think we should go. What do we need to do to get there? And maybe that's something for your projects, an approach you can, work out or have a think about what you think the future should look like, whether it's in transport technology or any other space. Work out what needs to fill that gap, and then what's the focus of your here and now action in terms of your project. Sorry, I realised I've thrown in another slide there.
That's all right. That's good.
My pet hate is this phrase, data is the new oil. Anyway. But,
it is actually an expression I do not like.
However,
having said that,
data is increasingly important. So in this new world of transport, and we began to touch on some of the possible sort of linkages and connectivity of different industries and reasons for using the data to connect things, data mining, data sharing, data security, not topics I'm familiar with, but probably more you are in terms particularly of security and IP. But it also raises, from a technology point of view, things like, do we lease or do we buy? So as Keolis Downer, as a transport provider, do we say, okay, well, we're going to go, the best technology today in autonomous vehicles is Navia, for in the market, but we go with them now, is it the DeLorean? Should we have waited and leased so we can keep lease 3 different types of vehicle and see which one works best? Or do we commit to one, have a really good relationship, hit the market hard, or do we,
Those strategic decisions are, because the one thing that you know for sure about the future is that it's different from what you imagine. So you can constantly have to keep expanding. And recently I've started to use the language. I used to talk about, looking with a telescope into the future, or, try and get that long distance view. And I actually think nowadays we need to think more, let's get a wide angle view that actually can't see over the hill. Doesn't matter how strong our telescope is, we can't see what's over the hill. But we can look at all sorts of things that are going on now and use some of the techniques that we'll be doing in this subject to try and find connections that other people haven't seen. Because actually the power is in the gaps, is in identifying a gap that other people haven't noticed.
Yep, that's right.
So, yeah, bring your wide-angle lenses, folks.
I'm just trying to think. There's a few more slides, but it's mostly background data, and there's some interest. If you like this subject, there's some interesting modelling that's been done about what would transport in Lisbon, Helsinki, Dublin, whatever, look like if it was, autonomous vehicles replaced the private car and potentially a lot of buses as well. You've still got mass, rail, heavy rail, light rail doing mass transit stuff, but the shorter trips are being done in a completely different way, and people have modelled that, and it's quite an interesting stuff. So have a look at that if it appeals. What else?
Well, I'm sure that
this is the industry global shifts expected on the car industry. Sorry.
Well, what I was going to say is these final pieces are really good starting points for the research that needs to accompany understanding the problem and really deciding what kind of focus to take. So it's a really good starting point. These guys clearly have a whole heap of activities that they'll get to do along the way, where they'll go and try and do some of their own research and ideation, but there is no shortage as well of academic material and peer-reviewed journal and raw data, I never know how to say that, that they'll have access to through part of this process. So, yeah, that's more than enough to get us going.
Cool.
And, yeah, we'll work from there.
Looking through the final few slides, there's some.
You're happy for me to share the slides in the broader pack?
Yep.
Excellent, thank you.
A lot of them have come from other people, so and there I have attributed them appropriately. There's
as no doubt will all of these students when they present their own work. Cool. Well, I hope you agree with me that that was absolutely fascinating and a really great starting point for you to think about which of the problems you're going to fall in love with as part of your CLN projects. So as you remember, there are really 3 components to the group project in addition to some of the weekly group activities that you'll be doing along the way. So the first of them, which is due relatively early on, is preparing your design brief. So that is really falling in love with the problem, deciding what problem it is that you are going to solve, and being really articulating the content of that brief. Then subsequently, towards the end of the semester, in fact in weeks 10 and 11 respectively, you'll be asked to give your group presentation and then to follow that up with a detailed written report. So the time has come now to take the inspiration from there, to start working with your groups to identify which aspect of the problem it is that you would like to explore, and to take that further over the course of the semester. Questions, concerns, compliments, considerations along the way, do not hesitate to reach out to me. And if you do have extra questions for Jonathan, he has very kindly offered to answer some of those if you get them to me. Looking very much forward to seeing your results. Cheers.